Hello YouTube and welcome to my Tekken 8 graphics enhancement and optimization guide. This video serves as an updated and final version of my previous guide, which was originally in the form of a Steam post on Tekken 8 forums. It is now updated as a visual guide, so you can easily follow everything step by step. In this video, what we are gonna do is first add some commands to the Unreal Engine files of this game. After setting the commands, we will do some tinkering and settings outside of Unreal Engine, like Windows settings and using some third-party tools. And finally, in the end, we will talk about the in-game graphic settings. All important commands and links needed for this guide are still present in that Steam post. Therefore, while I guide you guys here in this video, keep that Steam post open at all times, so you can easily copy-paste important commands and links from there. I have given the link to the Steam post in the description. Now, with all of that out of the way, without further ado, let's do this. As discussed before, what we are gonna do first is add Unreal Engine commands to the game. For that, go to your system drive, then users, your username, APPDATA, and then local. Here you have to find Tekken 8 folder. Then saved, config, and finally Windows. These are all the Unreal Engine files of Tekken 8. Now we will only be editing the engine file over here, so just open this with a notepad. Ignore the huge wall of text here and come to the bottom. Now go over to the Steam post and copy the system setting line and paste it as it is at the bottom here. What this actually do is tell the engine that now we will be giving you commands to follow. The first command is for chromatic aberration. If you don't know what that is, chromatic aberration applies a purple blurry effect to an image, like shown here in this right image. Not only it looks bad, but it also makes the image blurry, especially in games. To remove it, we use this scene color fringe command. Copy it from here as it is, and paste it here at the bottom. This will remove chromatic aberration from the game. In Unreal Engine, the value of 0 means a disabled effect and the value of 1 means enabled. The next command is max anisotropy. This command adds anisotropic filtering to the game. Whenever we view any surface in game from an angle like this floor here, the textures on the surface far from the camera will be blurred. Like this green surface here. Anisotropic filtering prevents that from happening. Notice the visible green textures in the right image, while the ones in the left image is blurred. That is a higher value of anisotropic filtering. As before, copy this command line from here and paste it here. You can set a value of 2, 4, 8, or 16 depending on your hardware. But this is not a taxing setting, so I recommend keeping this at 16. Next is depth of field quality. Depth of field is the effect of blurring out the far objects in certain cutscenes, while keeping focus on the near object, like in this picture here where you can see June very clear but the far objects in the background are blurred. Now Tekken 8 already has depth of field enabled by default, so if you want to keep it, you can ignore this line, but if you want to disable it in game, then copy-paste this command as it is. After that, we have ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is the graphical technology of creating realistic shadows on objects and characters, depending on where the light is coming from. Without ambient occlusion, the graphics will look very flat, like in this example. Ambient occlusion by default is set to 1 by the developers of this game, but if you want more ambient occlusion, then set this value from 1 to 4, but keep in mind that setting higher values also means losing some performance, so set this according to your needs and hardware. Next is screen space reflection. Screen space reflection is a graphical effect that enables a reflective surface of any object to show a reflection of its near surrounding. Like in this stage, you can see the wet parts of the ground showing a reflection of all the lights in the stage. Screen space reflections are also enabled by default in the game, but just like ambient occlusion, you can increase its value from 1 to 4, and same as before, higher values here also means losing more performance. The next one, tone mapper sharpening, is only used to apply some extra sharpening to the game, so if you want some, copy-paste this line as well. The next 5 lines is for shadow settings. In Tekken 8, shadows are a bit bright and very soft, and adding these 5 lines will make the shadows darker and sharper. If the shadows are way too sharpened for you, then I recommend setting the value of shadow max resolution to 4096. But keep in mind that applying these 5 lines, even with the value of 4096, is pretty taxing and you will lose a lot of performance. With a 3060 Ti at 1440p resolution, this cost me 8% of the performance, so apply this only if you have some extra headroom for performance. Use these next 4 lines only if you think the hit effects particles are too intensive in this game. Just copy-paste them, to reduce the intensity of those particles. Note that this will also reduce all other particles in game as well, like during rage art animations, so take into consideration. If you have no problem with particles in this game, then ignore this line. In the end, when you are done by adding all your desired lines, save the file and set the properties of the engine file to read only. Now you are done setting up your Unreal Engine commands. For people with outdated hardware that cannot run the game, if you want to gain some FPS, then setting value of chromatic aberration, depth of field, ambient occlusion and screen space reflection to 0 will gain you a lot of FPS, as we are literally disabling these effects. To add to that, you can set anisotropic filtering value to 2 and apply the 4 effect particles reducing lines as well. This concludes our first step of the guide, which was setting Unreal Engine commands. Now let us get to the second part of the guide, which is settings outside of Unreal Engine. This next step is only for Nvidia users, so if you are using AMD graphics cards, you should skip to the next chapter in this video. If you are an Nvidia user and you don't like temporal anti-aliasing, then you might want to apply DLAA in-game. Just a heads up that DLAA and DLSS cannot be used together, so only apply DLAA if you don't need the performance boost of DLSS. To apply DLAA, go to this link and download DLSS tweaks. After extracting the downloaded file, go inside the extracted folder and copy DLSS tweaks, DLSS tweak config and nvngx.dll file. Then paste it inside your game folder where the game's executable file is located. That would be your Steam library, Steam apps, Common, Tekken 8, Polaris, binaries, and inside Win64 folder. Now open this DLSS tweaks config file, and it will give you this message. Basically it tells you that by pressing OK, this will do some changes to the Nvidia registry files in your system. You can always undo this registry edit by going back to the extracted folder, and double-clicking Disable Nvidia SIG Override, so there is not need to worry. Now once you hit OK, this window will pop up. Click the drop-down menu in front of Force DLAA, and select True. Then hit Save and you are done. This will force DLAA in-game and the anti-aliasing will not be blurry anymore. Now we should do some steps to smooth out our gameplay experience by reducing frame time spikes. Your game may be playing at 60 FPS, but if your frame times are not stable, you will not get smooth gameplay. And stable frame times is even more important when it comes to fighting games. To get this done, go to the game's executable folder just like before. Right-click on the Polaris Win64 shipping file and go to its properties. Now go to the Compatibility tab and check Display Full Screen Optimizations. Then hit Apply and OK. After that, what you should do is somehow limit the game's FPS to 60. So if you are an Nvidia user, you can just go to Nvidia Control Panel and change the value of max frame rate to 60. You can also limit your FPS to 60 by using Riva Tuner Statistic Server. Just use the link I have given here to download it. Then open the app, and set frame rate limit here to 60 and you are done. A fair warning that limiting your FPS by any means adds a little input delay. Personally, I have done this for many games and never noticed anything lagging much, but that does not change the fact that the input delay is still there. After disabling full screen optimization and limiting FPS, you can now see that your frame time graph has drastically improved, and most of the time, it will literally be a straight line. Now I will show you how to install Reshade and my recommended preset for this game. If you are familiar with how to use Reshade, you can skip to the next chapter in the video. Use this link to download Reshade. Open it, hit Browse and select your games.exe file. Press Next, then select DirectX 10, 11, 12 here. Next. Click here so you get these options below. Now only select DPX and Luma Sharpen here and deselect all the rest. Now scroll to the bottom and click this one as well. In the list below, only select colorfulness and deselect all the rest of the options. Click Next and it will take a few seconds to download the Reshade effects you just selected. Then click Finish and your Reshade installation is done. Now we must configure Reshade settings inside the game. Once in game, press Home to bring up the Reshade menu. Now click Continue, Continue, Continue and Finish. Check the Luma Sharpen box here. Now you can use this slider to adjust sharpening according to your needs. After that, check the box in front of DPX, which will activate DPX filter, resulting in a bright image with good contrast and better saturation of colors. Just set the value of strength to 100 here, as I think 200 is a bit too much and looks too bright. You can also set contrast and saturation here according to your preference. Do the same for colorfulness filter, but set its value to 0.10 as 0.40 is way too much. Now I will keep toggling on and off Reshade, so you can see for yourself how much Reshade affects the game's looks. As you can see, the game has far better sharpening, colors, and contrast. On top of that, you can see a lot of clarity in the background objects when Reshade effect is on, compared to off. And this concludes the second part of the guide. Now let us get to the third part of this guide, and that is the in-game graphic settings. First thing is upscaling. If you don't want any upscaling in-game, set the upscaler here to TAAU and set rendering scale to 100. Basically, if you have set the rendering scale to like 70, then TAAU will upscale the game's image from 70% of the resolution you have set here. But if the rendering scale is at 100, then there is no upscaling done and it will give you native result. On the other hand, if you want to use upscaling for better performance, then use DLSS if you own Nvidia cards and TAAU if you have AMD. Don't use any other upscalers as their results are not very good and have ghosting issues. For DLSS, set DLSS quality, balanced or performance depending on your graphics card. For TAAU, just set render scale higher or lower. For anti-aliasing, this will never have any effect if you have any sort of upscaling enabled, or if you have DLAA enabled. At upscaling disabled, higher values just means more anti-aliasing and also more performance cost. I would suggest not setting this to ultra as you will never notice the difference. Set this one to high or medium as per your needs. Shadow quality sets the intensity of shadows. This is a very taxing setting, and just like anti-aliasing, there seems to be no difference in high and ultra. Medium has fewer shadows and low has almost no shadows at all. I recommend keeping this at high if you have the GPU power. If you want to save some performance, then set it to medium. Texture quality controls the quality of textures in-game. This setting is dependent of your graphics card's VRAM. The game uses 6.7 GB of VRAM if textures are set to ultra, so if your graphics card is 8 GB or above, set textures to Ultra. For graphics cards of 6GB VRAM, set to high as the game eats 5.4 GB. As for 4GB VRAM graphics cards, you have to resort to low textures as even medium uses 4.5 GB. You can try setting it to medium, but it may give you some performance issues. Effects quality controls a lot of effects in the game. These are the examples of ultra and low effects quality. You can notice that in low, the fog under their feet is removed, there are almost no leaves flying around, and even the water quality is degraded and looks flat in the distance. Also to note that low settings will also reduce snow particles in stages where there is snow. The values of ultra to low controls the intensity of all these effects, so set them according to your preference. Post-process quality, as the name suggests, applies post-process effects in the game. These include effects like chromatic aberration, ambient occlusion, and depth of field. We have already set most of these effects on engine level, which will overwrite whatever value you set here, so I recommend keeping this at ultra. The last setting is background quality. This setting controls quality of all background objects depending on the value you set for it. At low settings, you can see that the floor has low poly models. The stones, pebbles, and the leaves in the distance also are very low quality. And on top of that, screen space reflection is also missing. The value of screen space reflection will be overwritten here by the one that we did on engine level. As for the rest of the background objects, set this according to your hardware. And this brings us to the end of the guide. If this guide has helped you, please leave a like. Also kindly subscribe and support the channel. Good luck, and happy gaming!